Welcome to episode 4 of Just a Thought 845 Ashton podcast.
What's my name?
Well, first, I am your host, Q Talks, and this is your host.
Ashton.
All right, so let's get into first thing first. It's been a month. I know we've been gone for a while, but as we told you, we're only going to be airing every first Monday of the month. So we had a glitch because that first Monday was a holiday, which was July 4th weekend. So we had to move it to the second Tuesday of the month, which just this month, not every month, just this month, we're going back to every first Monday of the month. But to get right into this thing, today's episode 4, navigating conflict and disagreement in your community.
Let's talk about it. So we got some heavy hitters today. We're definitely welcoming back some people as well.
Yes.
And it is our pleasure to introduce once again Miss Edith Rivera.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
As well as another special, very, very special guest. We have the regional director for the New York State NAACP, Wilbur Aldridge. And so we'll have you tell us a little bit something about what you do.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, Wilbur. Welcome. First thing first, welcome to our show.
You.
Because
it
is him that is allowing.
To be here.
Yes.
Definitely my pleasure to be here. What I do, a little bit of everything. You know, I'm the kind of chief bottle washer. I'm in charge of 13 NAACP branches throughout the Mid-Hudson region, on 5 different counties. Certainly are an array of issues. However, all of them fall pretty much under the scope of several different areas, which makes it a little bit easier, but at the same time, it's a lot. The best part about it is I got a lot of good people that work for us, so therefore, it's easier. It makes it a lot easier to get things done. Yes. So it's really comfortable in the sense of I've been doing this work now for almost about 60 years. Not specifically in this job, but in some shape, form, or fashion, dealing with discrimination and bias and systemic bias for all of that period of time.
That's amazing.
That's it in a nutshell. As far as
that was a big
what
nutshell.
It's a lot, but it's rewarding in most instances. Extremely frustrating as well.
But we can say you do a great job. We work for
thank
you, so we are honored to have you on our show and be able to work for you. So
I'm the one honored. That's great. Great you guys are doing this.
Oh, thank you. But we did have a third guest, Jose Fitzgerald. He is from Hudson Lake. He was an incarcerated fella that actually got his master's in prison. And he started a company called Hudson Link. Well, I didn't say he started. He started working with a company named Hudson Link where they help other fellow incarcerated individuals get their bachelor's and master's, so when they get out of prison, they're able to, get right into the world. Now, the issue is on his way here, his wife had something happen. I don't know what the real issue is. All I know is a medical issue, and they had to rush to the hospital. So you're in our prayers. We thank you for calling us and letting us know that you're unable to make it, but your wife comes first. Don't worry about us. We okay.
Yes,
We're okay.
Yes.
But back to the show. We definitely have to, before we even get into the conversation, I'm excited, and I know Ashton's excited as well, to introduce the artist of the week. So I'm going to let him do it because that's his homeboy. Go ahead and introduce your homeboy.
Definitely. So we get to have the pleasure to have Hervé Alexandre. He is a Rockland County-based saxophonist artist. He's performed at the illustrious Apollo Theater and XSW, so South by Southwest. He's also an educator, and within the tri-state area is opening up programs for performance arts-based programs for organizations in the area. So it is definitely my pleasure to introduce my brother and friend, Hervé Alexander, and to let him do his thing.
Yes, the artist of the week. I'm gonna let you speak on that. That's your boy. Let me tell you, he always blows me away every time. That's
Definitely.
talent, pure talent.
Yeah, I've definitely been listening to Hervé for 10 plus years, and it's a blessing to be in the presence of something like that. So thank you again, and definitely we'll be seeing you again.
Yes. All right, well, let's get into the conversation. Are
do
you
it.
excited? Because I've been waiting for this conversation for a while. Navigating conflict and disagreement in your community. I guess I'll start with the first question. It's going to go to Wilbur. I have to. So, as we all know, conflict is a clashing or sharp disagreement as between ideas, interests, or purpose. A state or condition marked by lack of agreement or harmony, right? That is what the internet has told us what conflict means. Lipstick on my teeth. All right. So question number 1, Wilbur. Whenever people disagree over their values, motivation, perception, ideas, and desires, right? What does it mean, in your own words, conflict?
Well, conflict to me is very simple. There's either two ways of looking at something, or multi ways of looking at something, and therefore there is a disagreement about who's right and who's wrong. That's ultimately what it's about.
Okay.
However, in reality, when you're talking about values and culture and performances of people, there really is no right or wrong because it's each individual's choice.
Absolutely.
So it's almost like a case of you got to agree to disagree and then move on.
So you touched on a word that Ashton actually told me earlier today, that he hates when people say, I agree to disagree. He doesn't believe in it. He feels that he lost the battle if he gets to a point in the conversation where you agree to disagree. He feels like there's no win. That someone has to win the conversation.
We both
Everyone
lost.
lost.
Ashton's wrong. That's the only way I can tell you. You agree to disagree, meaning that I will give you the privilege of believing and performing in the manner in which you want to perform, because I want you to do the same for me.
Edith has something to say. She's tapping on there.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna agree with Ashton. It's almost like a defeat. It's you're giving defeat over. It's like a passive aggressive way to say, okay, you're right, but I really know I'm right.
Oh, that's a battle.
Now I can say this on that. You're not really losing anything because you didn't give anything up. What you did was allow the other individual the same privilege that you want them to give you.
But does that apply to every conflict or every disagreement? Because sometimes a conflict can also be within yourself.
I feel like we both didn't win.
Yeah. I
You
don't think
made
it's
it-
about a win, though.
It's not a win, it's a
almost
preference.
It's a
not a
compromise
win,
in
so
between.
it feels-
And it's a preference. It's a preference.
I get
You
it.
can't,
I get it.
You cannot change someone else's culture.
Not at all.
No.
And they're not going to allow you to change their
Not at
culture.
all.
You cannot change someone else's values. You may add to those values,
That is true.
but you cannot change them because they're too ingrained.
Oh, wait a minute. First thing first, Wilbur, I am the epitome of debates. I love debating, but I can honestly say you may win me in the debate. 'Cause that was good. You cannot change someone's value, but you can add to their value.
Yes.
That's why he's the boss.
And therein lies the compromise.
That's why he's runs the NAACP regional director. All right, Ashton, go into your second question.
All right, let's talk about what does conflict. Oh,
Yeah, it jumped around, so we're
Yeah.
going to talk about conflict resolution a little bit.
yeah. All right. So, what happens when there's no resolution to the conflict?
So let's go back. Let's rewind back. So as we all know, the Supreme Court action that happened, right? So now they're saying, let's start with the one where people are allowed to tell you no to enter your facility. Let's start with that one. They're allowed to discriminate, honestly, truth be told. So what do you do when you are faced with that kind of issue or that kind of conflict where you are going into a facility? As we all know, social media has Victoria's Secret big on that. Starbucks is big on these big issues where the lawsuits have happened, but now they're legalizing this issue. So what do you do in terms of if you cannot find a resolution to that conflict? If you can't call the cops, you can't protest, you can't put it on social media because it's legal.
It's just legal.
Well, if you're asking me, to me the answer is you do as you have always done. When you file lawsuits, you can always file a lawsuit. Even if the Supreme Court made a decision, it doesn't mean that that decision cannot be challenged. So you continue to do the challenging. And at some point, maybe the decision may be reversed or modified.
Okay.
Now, what I think will happen in the instances that you're talking about is that at some point, and depending upon our advocacy work, it will be the statement from the Supreme Court will be somewhat modified and explained so that it will not deal with issues of discrimination.
Okay. Now,
Because they didn't do it when they gave the decision. They left it open.
that's what I was going to say. They left it open. Now, what I was going to ask, how do we know whether it's constitutional or whether it's illegal, since it's an open kind of passing law that they did, if that makes sense?
I think, again, that's where the challenge comes in. You have to challenge it in order to get them to explain and add conditions onto what they've said.
Now, Edith, for you as a parent and someone who is in an organization that contributes to the students, with the Supreme Court law that passed with affirmative action, what do you say to the kids that are going to school now that just graduated and are being met with no's because of that?
Well, I'm going to piggyback off what Wilbur said. It's really challenging the system to say, how does it really impede on my constitutional rights? Is it right, or is it because they can get away with it? Because if you don't challenge it, then it becomes the norm. So that's just through history and time. We're told something is, and if nobody comes along and says, no, but we can do this, then it never gets challenged. Then it just becomes what it is.
So how do you tell a student to challenge that without getting in trouble?
Well, they have to do their research, right? So they're going to have to dive in to see where does that actually fall in. Do they have the right to do that? Does that impede on their everyday rights as a person, not even just race or culture or sexual identity, just as a human being? Does it impede? So once they do their research, is really navigate them to the Congress, write letters, do appeals, lobbying. There are organizations that they can, get a hold of. The good thing is now that the internet allows a tremendous amount of access to our youth that we didn't have when we were younger. So sometimes they don't even have to leave their home to do that. So it's having them use technology in a more appropriate, effective way for them.
Okay. Now, got to jump into this because now I'm very interested in the stories, right? We got to jump into the story. So we know your story, Edith, but we're going to come back so you can tell a little bit more about your story. But first we want to hear a little bit about Wilbur's story, about your son, because that was a shocking story that I found out about. So I would like you to tell everybody about your story, because I would like to hear from the horse's mouth? The horse's mouth.
Well, let me say before I even go into that, it's a difficult story to talk about. And frankly, I have not talked about it publicly it'll be 21 years, in fact, July 17th. So it's really even more raw because of the timing.
Ooh, exclusive. Okay.
However, it wasn't buried because you can't bury something like that.
Yeah.
Within, but it's just something that I just have not really delved into with anyone. Maybe those people that are extremely close to me know some, but not know exactly whatever I felt about it because I just never talked about it. What happened was, it was on July 17th, and my son had mental health issues. Michael was adopted, and based upon that, seemed to cause problems for him. So he was constantly, even from when he was in elementary school, he was constantly in some kind of difficulty all the time. That's not true. Not all the time, some of the time. At any rate, he had gone to a juvenile facility at one point. People don't respond to the needs of young people in this county the way they should. They didn't then, and they don't now. There are very few and limited resources for kids who have any kind of mental health issues. I, who knew everybody, I thought, in this county, went everywhere talking about what he needed or what I needed to get for him, none of which was available or was provided. When he went to a juvenile facility, I think what he learned there was how to be a better criminal or a different kind of criminal. So he came out. This was a kid who had a great heart, really great heart. At any rate, and I'm chopping this up. At that point, he went, while he was in the juvenile facility, which will tell you something about him, he got his equivalency diploma there. So he was, and a very bright young man. At any rate, after he came out, maybe I should have moved away, because maybe if I moved away, it would have removed the element that he had been involved with, but I'm not sure that that would have made any difference either. I had been to a friend of mine's we had a brunch thing. It was in the summer, obviously, it was in July. And when I came home, I knew all the police officers. I had just got in the house, and the police got pulled up behind me almost, and came in and said, "Oh, we need to talk to you." I knew at that point it was probably something that they had to say about him, something that transpired. So the guy who spoke to me, the officer that spoke to me, said, "Oh, well, Wilbur, we have to tell you there was an incident with Michael." So I said, "Okay, what did he do?" He says, "Well, there was a shootout." I said, "A shootout?" Now, this kid, I don't own guns, never have owned guns. He did not own a gun, and nor did I think he had access to any gun. So anyway, he said, "Yes, there was a shootout." So I said, "Oh, with Michael and who?" He said, "Oh, the police." So they said, "Oh, and he was killed." Well, oh, no, he said, "Now, know that the officers did not know that that was your son." So I said, "Okay." And then he said, "Well, in the course of the shootout, he was killed." Okay, well, you really kind of go numb when that happens. And he then, I don't remember too much else that they said after that, other than they wanted me to go to Nyack Hospital to identify him. Well, if you're coming to me to tell me that my son's dead, why do I need to go and identify him? Because you obviously know who he is. But I was going to go, and then they said, "Well, maybe you shouldn't go." So I didn't go. I couldn't deal with that at that point. But it kept ringing in my head. We didn't know that that was your son. Right. Well, do you kill anyone's 17-year-old son? Anyway, during the course of everything else, one police officer said to me, "Well, you really don't want to make any stink about this, because you don't want everybody to know how often he was in trouble." I said, "That is the least of my concern." At any rate, then well, I had to plan a funeral, so I didn't have time to deal with them. One of the local politicians said, how about if maybe this was like 3 days after the funeral or something, how about if I set up a meeting with you and the police officers so they can tell you about the incident? I said, well, what is the purpose of that? If you think that that's going to create forgiveness on my part, that ain't happening. So I don't see the sense in doing that. Now, maybe I should have, because then I probably would have known who was involved. But I didn't. At any rate, after that happened, the kids were in an uproar, community kids. I had two choices. I could either choose to spur them on and create all kinds of havoc throughout the county, because he was known all over Rockland County. Or I could try and take this and do some good with it somehow. So a friend of mine said to me, let's take a wrong situation and turn it into something good. I said, what are you talking about? They wanted to establish a scholarship fund in his name through the Rockland County Negro Scholarship Fund. Well, to me, that was a good thing, but the stipulations I put on it was that it had to go to someone who was going to be majoring in either psychology or criminal justice. Because I felt there needed to be people who were going to work to try and change the system. After that, I was already involved in the NAACP when that happened, so I just got more involved in the NAACP. Now, I could either hate the police or try and change the police. So from the last 20 years, that's what I've done, is try and change the perspective of police and how they deal with people of color. I'm not going to say that's been necessarily successful, but it certainly has opened some eyes anyway. So that really, I guess that's my putting it in a nutshell. That's kind of what it is. A lot more went on within that time, but nothing that really helped. The other thing that was really good about it, if I had to find something good about it, was that I was able to take that and deal with some mental health issues here in the county. And that changed something systemic. So it wasn't just about him, it was for anybody. So that worked fairly well. People were comforting. But see, one of the things that I really didn't want was for him to be forgotten. So, and I really kind of thought that was it, because people go on with their own lives, and as they should. But last year was 20 years, and one of his friends called and said, would we meet them up at the cemetery? So my wife and I said, yeah, we'd go. And when we got there were about 35 of his friends who were there. So I know he wasn't forgotten. That's really basically what it is. So it's been, thank you. It's been a journey, but it doesn't get easier. My friend across the street lost his daughter to cancer, who was only 30. She just turned 30. So it was really kind of in that, and we live in a cul-de-sac, so everybody's pretty close within the cul-de-sac. So it affects people, and he's going through, I know what he's going through. Other people say, oh, I know how you feel. You couldn't possibly. No. Unless you've literally had the experience, you couldn't possibly know what it is. But you survive and you move on and you take a bad situation and try and turn it into something good. One of the things that was kind of funny was most of the politicians were all afraid that I was going to call Al Sharpton. I ain't thought about Al Sharpton. That was the farthest thing from my mind, but that was their concern, and they figured that it would create all kinds of problems. Could I have done it? Sure, I could have caused all kinds of problems in Rockland, but what good would that do? You know, it wouldn't bring him back. It wouldn't change anything. My thing is about being a change agent.
Well,
Yeah.
you changed us. Look at us.
Thank you
We're
for
just
sharing.
spawn of you. So yes, thank you, Edith. Thank you for sharing your story. So your son is being well lived through all of us, through all the youth in the NAACP in Rockland County and all the chapters you are in charge of. So don't worry, your son lives on. Aw. All right, Edith, because now I know that
do
touched
I-
you
how
because
do-
you have
It
all
did,
sons.
yeah.
All sons.
Well, there's 4 of them, 4 boys and 3 girls.
Ooh.
So there's 2 that are youngest and then 1 that's a little older. But like I said, when I joined Opportunity Now and kind of came to Rockland, it was more to find programs that really keep kids off the streets, enrich them in culture, being that we're like a mixed race. So I wanted to be able to, like my son puts it one way, like I'm not Spanish enough to be considered Puerto Rican, but I'm not black enough to be considered black. So raising boys to have a strong identity within themselves and their culture and embrace it, you know, with both sides. They don't have to choose one or the other. And then getting into the field with mental health. So that kind of touched me because that's exactly my field. So I have like a real passion for kids who don't, people say, oh, they should know. But how? When there are adults that don't even know. You know, so you figure somebody has to teach them, right? And then back, you know, in the day, school used to teach us everything. You know, we would get our culture from home. We would get our values from home. But school would teach us a lot of the life skills. Now it's like they're not even doing that. They're pulling away from that. It's just straight academics. But you can't do academics without the life skills that you need. And not everybody does secondary education. So they do trade or they go right into the workforce because they have to for whatever reasons, and they go back to school later. But teaching them the life skills and teaching them that the world is not pretty. You know, not everybody is nice. It's not rainbows and butterflies. You know, it's really hard out there, and nothing is handed to you. You know, some of these kids now in generation, it's like, well, why didn't they give it to me? I showed up and did what?
This
You,
generation.
you know what I'm saying? Like they didn't even have to let you in the door.
Yeah.
Like they don't even understand that. So it's really affording them the experience to understand that someone is hungrier behind them. So if they stay hungry, then they're always a step ahead of the next person. And embracing the fact that everybody is different and everybody brings something different to a situation. So no matter what their background is. And mental health is one of those that's a wide range of difficulties that we experience. Post-COVID, kids that may not have been classified are now classified. And now you're seeing a lot of other difficulties come up, and now they're paying attention more to mental health. And now you're getting more funding with mental health. You're getting more programs with mental health. So that therapeutic aspect now in schools is going to shift. Now they're putting more TSP programs, which is the therapeutic special ed, in general ed schools. And now the vehicle is trauma. And then what's trauma? And that comes with conflict. Whether parents are, I have to go to work or stay home. Who's going to watch my kids? And then you leave them to the devices. And sometimes we're losing our kids nowadays. We don't even know to what. Social media is invisible. Yeah, and it's invisible. Like you really just don't know. And that you can't see it, you can't touch it. But you know, yeah. And then you have to equip your kids with knowing that what you're seeing may not be exactly what that is. And that's hard because kids are like, I see that, it moves, it talks, it does, but that's not reality. This is, like you get into with people, you know? So I think we have to stay close with our kids. We have to be in tune with our kids. And there's no such thing as, like you said, like a bad kid. It's bad choices. It's just bad choices. And I know as me, for a parent, I don't know everything, but I'm willing to learn, to listen, to take in what people have to tell me in order to then give that to my kids.
I have one last question before we close out the conversation, and this is a mental health question. For those who do not know if someone is suffering from mental health and they are being approached with conflict, how do you, I guess, approach that? Like, for instance, if someone comes up to me and they're having a mental health issue, but they're coming so aggressive, how do I approach that in a way where either one, I analyze and see it's a mental health because I'm not a trained professional, or do I, become aggressive, or like Sean, Ashton's favorite word, I don't pause. So do I take a moment? Like, what do we do for those who don't know?
Well, in that moment, you have to pause. You have to assess the situation. And although humanely you want to react to that aggression, doing the opposite helps that person. So because they're experiencing something that they don't understand what's happening. Their body's moving, they're already internally, in disarray. And then the world around them is just that stigma. So sometimes saying, I hear you. I see that you're struggling. I see that's very upsetting. Just those positive affirmations and those calming gestures changes. So then they come from a state of being really upset to now oh, wait, you're willing to listen to me. You're not the norm of what I'm used to people reacting to me of indifference. So when you see somebody really irate and screaming, it's just you need something, I see you struggling. Your tone of voice. Your tone of voice, eye contact, your body gesture. Sometimes you have to bring yourself to their level, and that's usually helpful because they feed. I mean, you think about it. The more aggression you give, the more then it just keeps going. Nobody ever. So we talk about it in schools when we teach kids about power struggle and adults with power struggling with kids, and that's a conflict where one person wants to be right. So when you're in that conflict, we teach it more like a tug of war. So we're taught, if we are having a power struggle with a kid, sit down. I told you to sit down. And the kid is literally anxiety ridden, has to walk around the room, is drop the rope. So if you drop the rope, there's no tug of war now. There's no argument, there's no conflict. You let that go.
Unfortunately, I'm just going to jump in.
Yeah, that's fine, Wilbur.
that works when you're with two kids or two people who are somewhat reasonable. We have become so desensitized in this country, be it kids or adults, that our value for human life has just, I won't say it has diminished, but it has diminished greatly as far as the value is concerned. And now it's a case of shoot first and things are done. There is no conversation. And even if I say you're right, that still doesn't mean that you're not going to blow me away, unfortunately.
Right, that's where that kind of training
has to happen. Yeah, but at this stage, I don't know that that's kind of going to work too well because you first got to be protective of yourself. And in most instances, many instances, I won't say most, it happens even before there's any cross conversation.
Of course. Of course.
So we've got to somehow begin to sensitize the next generation, not the ones that are 14, 15 now, because they may be already out there. But starting in the elementary level, teaching them the skills that you just mentioned.
Right.
So and the fact that you need to value the life of everybody that's around you.
Right.
And we're not doing that. The schools aren't doing it. I don't even know if it's done at home because everybody's running in various ways, doing all kinds of things. We don't sit down and eat anymore. That sounds corny, but we don't. When I was growing up, you had to be in the house.
You had to be in the house.
That's right. When they said dinner, if you didn't get in there then you just didn't eat.
Right.
That's right.
I'm not heating this back up.
Yes. Yeah. So I think somehow we've got to get that component back into the system. Now, unfortunately, we're putting an awful lot of weight on teachers and police, believe it or not. I'll say it, even police. We expect people to do things with our kids that they don't have the skills to do.
Well, may I interject? Now, for those that you said start with elementary school kids, what about the ones our age that are already at this age that are facing the conflict? So what do we do for that? Because now, like you said, many people are shoot first, talk later. But what do we do now when we are faced with this conflict?
This
Right now,
is
I'm
going to
writing
sound
emails.
flippant, but I'm going to pray hard. That's the best thing I
Emails,
can. You can't control.
Okay.
You know, we've lost. People don't. They lose control, and based upon that, you are the recipient of that loss.
Yes.
Whatever that may be. You know, we have families that have members that they haven't spoken to each other in years. That didn't used to be.
Yeah.
Right, right.
You know, they have arguments, but then and you pull it together. You know, that's not taught in the homes anymore.
Yeah.
You know, siblings that don't speak. How could that be? You know, but that's the reality that we live in. How we go about changing that, I don't know, especially for an older person, because once again, whatever values we have, we're grounded in those values.
But that's also in education too. Yeah, but I know for education though, Wilbur, that they are implementing a lot of more mental health in general at schools. They have been increasing psychologists and therapists and social workers in school. It's not just the special ed programs or the special programs like Rockland BOCES or Southern Westchester and BOCES. So working on the ground with them, there are things that are starting to change at the elementary school level. But when we stop moving on fear and move with reason and understanding, there's a difference. And there's also buy-in for teachers who have been teaching and don't buy into the new understanding of education and mental health. That kid is just bad. No, there are things. Like their day starts with no food in their house. Mom may not be there. Their clothes weren't cleaned over the weekend. The bus ride is crappy. Their day starts before they even get in that building with you. And then you go in and go, and you don't have a pencil? And where's your book bag? And where's your homework?
Yeah.
You know, so it's also changing a mindset to understand that the human aspect, right, that we bring into. So it is starting to change. I can say that because I'm on the ground with them. But it's a slow pace because the buy-in is not 100% yet.
But think about the number of people you lose.
Yes.
A slow pace.
One
I'm
is
full
more.
aware.
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
slow
no, I
pace,
know, I
but
know.
It's just you
Yeah.
lose so many people
Yes.
because
Yeah.
one teacher decides that
Correct.
you are a bad kid or this group is a bad kid.
Correct.
Then
Yeah.
Yeah.
so you set up a scenario that to me is unacceptable. So I don't. And we keep those teachers.
Yes.
I am fully supportive of teachers. I really am. However, think about it. A teaching profession is the only profession that we have, regardless to how you perform. If you're there for 10 years, you cannot be fired.
That's true.
That is
Tenure.
correct.
Yeah.
It's actually after 4 years.
4 years.
Oh, it's 4 years now?
Once you become tenure at 4 years.
4
Oh,
years,
okay. I
thought it
didn't
was
realize
10
that had
years.
changed.
At 4 years, you are tenured. Some districts
You're
do
still
3.
learning the system at 4 years.
Well,
Yeah.
therein lies
Yeah.
part of the problem.
yeah,
So
I agree.
once they're tenured, they don't do new lesson plans. They use the same lesson plans year after year, and they don't teach individuals. They teach a group
Correct.
rather than dealing with the individual kids. So they set up scenarios for kids to feel as if they are less than.
Yeah.
And that's where the conflict starts. So something that I learned in therapy, just to end the conversation, Yes, I'm in therapy, you guys. I have to be because whew, if I'm not,
Actually, it's very helpful.
yeah, I would not be who I am today. Ashton can attest to that. But the one thing I learned in therapy, because I've always been the type of person, I'm a giver. I'm a people pleaser. I'm always giving. I will give you the last. Like, that's just who I am. That's how I was raised. That's just my family. One of the issues that I can say that I had a problem with was I would give, but then when I wouldn't receive, I'd feel some type of way, right? So then I had to learn to give without the impulse of receiving. That was step one. The next thing I had to learn was when people react, it had nothing to do with me. I actually had to read a book where they said if someone shoots you in the head, just know that that had nothing to do with you. So, although I wouldn't allow someone to shoot me in the head, but it just shows that people, like what Edith is saying, people are going through X, Y, Z behind closed doors. And then they come, they're smiling in their face, or they're irate, or whatever the issue is. It makes you realize, like, wait, this has nothing to do with me. You're probably upset because you had a flat tire, and then this, and then now I came inside. I'm like, hey, where's this? And you're like, because now I'm just getting the chain of yelling. So I've learned over the years not to take things personal. I guess that makes it easier for me to maneuver through conflict, and I can argue because now I don't take it personal. But one of the things that so it's just my thing, every time someone does something, I always just say, it has nothing to do with me. Like, this has nothing to do with me. You could be upset. I'm going to answer you back, but I know it has nothing to do with me, even if it has something to do with me. It's nothing to do with me. But that's how I maneuver through conflict. So that's my ending solidification of the conversation. But Ashton, what'd you like to say?
Well, I say, man, at the end of this episode, navigating conflicts and disagreements in your community. Let go and let God and let them people be.
That's it. Now, would I guess like to end the conversation on the final remark for our younger audience that is watching that does not, or even the older audience that does not know how to navigate conflict? I'll start with you, Wilbur, as your closing remark.
Thank you. This was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. My closing remarks would be, let's look how to end the systemic problems.
Yes.
Not look solely at ending the problem, but what created the problem in the first place. And that's where we need to have the focus.
That's perfect. Start with the top and then we'll figure it out.
Yes, I agree.
Edith?
Understanding, like getting to understand the root of what is happening, why is it happening, what has happened before and never been changed or never had a resolution, never was brought forth, the stuff that sits under the rug, why hide it, but whatever stays in the dark comes to light, right? So it's just getting understanding and pushing forward.
Well, that is the end of this conversation. Woo, this was a good conversation. So excited. All right, let's get into the current events of this week. Are you guys ready to see it's more of a month because we've been gone for the month.
Been gone for a while.
So we are going to get into the current events, all the past that has happened within June and maybe the first week of July, and the present that is going to happen for July and August. And here is our current events.
Call the meeting back to order. Like I was saying before, I would like to thank all the staff members of East Ramapo for all the hard work they do, but specifically Kathy and our Vice President Sabrina Charles Pierre, who's spent the past, couple of hours or more going over the votes, and Kathy spent the past. He's always going all out for the district. That being said, I believe we have the results from tonight's budget vote, and I will turn it over to our Vice President, Sabrina Charles Pierre, for the tallies.
Thank you. 2,545 voters voted on the revised budget proposition, with 1,994 yes votes to 768 no votes, the budget passed.
Try to get by, but I'm burning. My mind is right. All these thoughts are troubling. Fighting to give up my pain. Fighting to be on my lane. My mind running to the other side. When it to leave my life, then it tries to take me out. Tell you what I need.
Some people chase dreams. Some people chase fantasies. I chase freedom, fam. I want to stretch my hands, feel no walls. I want to stand as tall as I possibly can and be as far from the ceiling as possible. I'm chasing freedom. Ultimate freedom is the ability to make sure everybody around me feels the same length and breadth of freedom. When we all can dream as vast as we want to, that's freedom for me.
In the decades before Jackie Robinson became the first black player in the majors, there were dozens of leagues around the country for players who couldn't be in the MLB because of their color.
We didn't only play baseball. We were taught to be gentlemen. We was taught to hold our head up, respect people, and have respect for the ball game.
Join us on July 16th at Clover Stadium as we celebrate the long tradition of the Negro Leagues. Let's go Boulders!
Whatever happened to predictability? The milkman, the paper boy, the evening TV. How did I get delivered here? Somebody tell me please. 'Cause this whole world is just really confusing me. Clouds That's as mean as you've ever seen. In a bird that knows your tune. Then a little voice inside of you whispers, kid, don't sell your dreams so soon. Everywhere you look, everywhere you go, there's a hand to hold on to. Everywhere you look, everywhere you face, somebody who needs you. La 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 la. La 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 la. Whatever happened to the good old days? Talking to friends.
It's just about 11 a.m. in Washington. The Supreme Court issued a major ruling on affirmative action in the 6-3 decision. The justices ruled that the consideration of race in college admissions is unconstitutional. We want to bring in NAACP Derek Johnson. Derek, let me go to you first. I know we just spoke about this in the last hour, but for viewers who are just joining us now at the top of the hour, your reaction to the Supreme Court decision ruling against affirmative action.
But the Supreme Court has failed America. It is unfortunate that we are not embracing diversity and opportunities. For the centuries of harm directed, state-sponsored against African Americans, a few decades of a program that was not perfect should not be. The worst thing about affirmative action is that it created Clarence Thomas. So this is a sad day for the future of this nation, and corporations, institutional higher learners must do all that they can to ensure diversity in their spaces.
So today we're just mobilizing to be heard, our voices heard. We want that the United States Congress Congress would pass Law 5038, which will expose all weapons being sold to Haiti and whoever is buying them, so that we can have sanctions and other things like that being done, passports revoked, visas stopped. The immediate need of Haiti is security. We need some kind of security in the country. We need to stop the flow of violence. We need to stop the stem and flow of weapons that are not made in Haiti, not manufactured in Haiti, yet are killing Haitians.
Peace so they don't stop the crime, stop the gang in Haiti. Yeah. So the gang stop killing the people.
You cannot have in 2023 some gang members who cannot even read, but they have a gun for $50,000 or $100,000 coming from the U.S. Who's giving them those guns? The oligarchs, instead of investing in the country, instead of having hospitals and schools and developing the country, they arm the young thugs out there, and those thugs are terrorizing the population. The product of Haiti. I am proud to see I'm a 50-year-old woman, a product of Haiti. I want to go home. I want to go home just like everybody else.